All right, you can be seated. Give a person a high five or a handshake. You guys are awesome. Give the worship team a hand. This church is a blessed church. You're blessed with the leaders that you have. We think so much of your leaders. I promote Quest all over the world and tell everybody they need to meet your pastors and meet this church. You guys are influencing the world. You'll see next week as well with the Brazil guys. But this morning, it's my privilege to be able to use this incredible LED screen in this beautiful facility that God has built here. And I want you to imagine this screen to be a mirror that you are going to see yourself in a way that you haven't seen yourself in up till now. You probably didn't even realize how good you look. We're going to show you how good you look. And to do that, we're going to introduce you to one of your main partners, and that's us, Club 1040. So you can kind of see in that logo there, Club 1040. What is a club? A club is a group of like-minded people who come together around a common purpose and mission. And that 1040 window, the 10th parallel and the 40th parallel, that's the greatest concentration of people. Now listen to this. Who were born, they lived their whole life, and their heart stops beating. They pass into eternity, never having met somebody who knows the Jesus you know. Can you imagine there's around a third of the world that is in that place called the 1040 window? 99% of them have never heard the name of Jesus even one time. So we'll talk about how we are changing that in this generation. And you've been a part of this for a number of years, but we've been doing this for now 30 years. I can't believe my wife is that. Never mind. We have grown children, and this is one of our children, our daughter Elizabeth there. She just turned 27 yesterday, but she's ahead of our communications team. The reason I show this slide is you can connect with what you are doing around the world by connecting with Club 1040 socials. If you've not been a part of the Instagram or Facebook Lives, every first Thursday of the month, we do a Q&A, live Q&A. It would be 8 a.m. Eastern time here from wherever we are in the world. So you can send in questions through direct messages, and then we'll do our best to answer those questions once a month and give you an update of what's happening. So how do you impact the world through Club 1040? There's three main ways. Three main ways is training, mobilizing, inspiring. Training especially leaders who will be church planters, and not just plant churches, but inspire or spark church planting movements. So not just a church plant, but a church that plants churches that plants churches. So movements of church planting in places where there are no churches. Mobilizing missionaries. We do cross-cultural mobilization. So every time you support Club 1040, not only are you supporting Matt and Julie Beemer, but you're supporting all the initiatives I'm talking about here. So every month, as you sow, as Pastor Kathy said, as you come here with your time, your talents, and your resources, and you sow here, a portion of that comes to Club 1040. And so every month you're investing in not just Matt and Julie Beemer, but all the leaders and all the people that are being mobilized through Club 1040. We provide free missionary services to those who are cross-cultural missionaries. So 100% of what people designate to those missionaries goes directly to them. And we do that through your support. It helps us to do that. And then inspire. That's what we get to do today. Inspire the church that we can. Everybody say we can. We can fulfill the Great Commission in this generation. Every generation has had the potential to reach its own generation. Up till now, each generation's fallen short. However, today we have more than 20 times the resources, the people, the money, the tools, more than 20 times, not 5 times, 10 times, 15 times, more than 20 times the resources to fulfill the Great Commission today. It's just a matter of stewarding those resources correctly and being strategic with those resources. And so that's in part what we do. And as Julie and Pastor Kathy did such a great job talking about the tools here, these are tools. One of the ways we steward the resources is we want to steward the next generation, which is a big part of your heart, and we love. That's why there's such an affinity with here at Faith Life Church with Club 1040. strong partnership there, and I believe a growing partnership. So these books are tools for you to use to inspire your children to be global leaders. And they are very loosely, and I do say very emphasized, loosely based on our family's adventures. And the reason I say very loosely is because Bentley, the British Bulldog, is actually representing my son, Jonathan. So, and he's on every page. So even the youngest children, you can get them before they're able to read, and you can say, "Where's Bentley?" to the little kids, and they're like, every page, Bentley's always doing something fun. He's getting sneezed on by a camel. He's always doing something fun. So it's a creative way to interact with even the children that can't read. And as they get a little bit older, and can read, then they actually have already had an interest in these tools. And these tools, at the back of the book, there's things about travel helps. There's recipes for things. There's language things. There's all kinds. So it's educational as well. So homeschool and VBS, all those kind of things. We encourage you with the fact that if you know people who need to know about these books, please encourage them to tell us, but also access those books here. But then I also want to tell you, because of your giving and because of what you do here, in part, you've helped 18,000 children be inspired to be global leaders through these tools. And then also, like what's happening today, these are actually from not long ago, we were in Austria with a big mission conference there with 30 mission organizations in Europe mobilizing children. And then there's a curriculum. This curriculum is a spirit-filled Go curriculum. It's a 4-week curriculum. And so there are now churches all across the U.S. and beyond the U.S. because of your giving that are being, not only are the tools, the books being used to inspire children, but now whole churches, kids are being inspired, and you have made that happen. So like I said, man, you look better than you even knew you looked. And turn to the person next to you and say, "You're looking good." Say, "No, I mean it. You're looking good." Okay, so maybe you're like, "Well, I love that. I want to be even more a part of it." And this is one of the ways you can be more a part of it. If you go to club1040.com, you can share our homepage, and you can do it through socials as well. Share a homepage, and this is the homepage, and you'll see on the homepage our 2 goals for this year is to see 300 individuals and 30 new organizations partner with Club 1040 this year. Your pastor will say a little bit more about that by the end of the service, but that's one way, is you sharing that information outwardly. So I've given you all the ways without it costing you anything extra that you can help Club 1040 by telling other people about these tools, sharing the socials, and then also staying connected with who you are and what you're doing through the socials with those live Q&As. So, okay. Today's message. You are the go in God. That's why we're wearing these shirts. We brought a bunch of them with you. And in fact, if you're like, "Well, I can't remember everything you just said," you're like, "But I still want to help Club 1040. Here's one of the ways you can get a shirt, and on the back there's a QR code. The other day I was in a church, and I was in a coffee line that was taking a long time, and all these teenagers were doing the QR code on the back of my neck, and I didn't know it. And they're like, "Club 1040, Club 1040, Club 1040," and they'd never heard of us before, so it's kind of cool. It works. So you are the going God. That's one way you can be that going God. Now, this is God without you doing your part. This is my message. This is God with you doing your part. Okay, Pastor Tom, I'm done. That's my message. All I want you to see is this is God. This is you on drug. No, this is what was that old commercial? Some of you remember. This is this is God without the go. And the go is you. This is God with you doing your part. The majority of you will never go overseas personally, but as one missionary statesman person said, everyone must either go themselves or send somebody in their place. And we all have a responsibility towards reaching those people who haven't heard. Your responsibility may be doing exactly what you're already doing today in the house. When we came yesterday evening, that wonderful table and everything was set up, and we were greeted, and this doesn't happen even in really large churches. I mean, some really large churches, I've had to haul everything in myself, and I end up sweating so bad, and it's just a mess, and it's painful. We came here, and the guy's like, we got you covered. We got you covered. There was like a handful, like a dozen people, half a dozen people that showed up, and they helped us set everything up. That is one way you can go in God. The stuff happening in the kids' church, the Quest School, all the stuff that's happening in Brazil. Anything you do to make this house fulfill its purpose, you are doing your going God. Now, some of you will actually also be mobilized to go personally. You might be going with Pastor Tom to carry his Bible and Kathy to carry their Bibles. You might be going to take pictures. You might be going through media. There's a lot of ways you can go. So the key is for you to discover your going God, and your pastors will help you do that. But I want you to see that without you, there's no going God. With you, there is a going God. Think about this statistically. Around 95% of the evangelical born-again Christian church in America does not bring 10% of their income to the local church. Now, that's not the case in a church like this. It's well taught. But that's the standard across, on average, according to Barna Research. So think about that. If you operated a business, we're going to start a business. We're going to start a restaurant, for example, right down here in Marion. We're going to start a restaurant, and only 5 out of 100 people who we serve food to are going to pay us. How long will you be in business? 95 people come and eat free, 5 people pay. You're not going to be in business very long at all. That's what's happened to the global mission of the church, is 95% of the American believers are not contributing to the local house, and because of that, that has a knock-on effect. I'll give you an example. After September 11th, the tithe of the American Christian dropped 60%. The year after that, 70% of American missionaries came off the mission field. So America controls a significant portion of the global wealth. We are also a significant portion of the global Christians. So if you put those two things together, that means we have an heightened responsibility for the global outreach of this unreached people in the world. And And you know, as I was praying for you this morning and praying for the service and things, there were some things that came up in my heart. And there's people in here, you are called to take local leadership responsibilities, and you never thought you ever could or would. And I just want to say that publicly. There's people in here that are supposed to be a part of the public school board or whatever you call it here. There's people that are supposed to be in this church that are supposed to be taking leadership roles within the community at a civic level, a government civic level, that are in this church and a part of this church body. And if you don't do that, it will minimize the impact of this congregation, but it will also permit a backlash that will minimize or push down what God's purpose is for this church. So I want to encourage you, that might be your goal. Your goal might be to be a community leader. Your goal might be to be a part of the school board and to be a light and an influence in something that's maybe doesn't have a lot of light in it. I don't know at all what it's like here in that. I'm sure there's a lot of great people involved in those things, but there might not be Faith Life Church people involved in those things, or maybe there are. I don't know. If you're already doing it, keep doing it, knowing that's good and important, and keep doing it. Get involved more. This is kind of the thing that came up in my heart. Don't think it's your pastors that are supposed to do that. It's supposed to be you that do that while they do their part of the assignment, going around spreading Quest and doing the different things that God's called them to do. But there's something in the house here, a supply for this local community that you have that is necessary in order to minimize, there will be backlash, but to minimize the backlash and increase the exponential impact of this house. And you're about to step into it, and if you don't engage in those things, you'll be sad. But if you do engage in those things, you all, not only you in this house, but the community itself will be glad. That's good news, isn't it? Praise God. So take it or leave it, but I encourage you to take it. Let me tell you a life of somebody that you've impacted and that is this guy right here. Let me introduce you to Rafi. In this picture, Rafi's a taxi driver, and he's known as Rafi the Rascal in this picture. Because when we first, in Lebanon, Beirut, Lebanon, we first met there, our team, we needed taxi drivers and things. You land in a place, you don't know anybody, you don't have vehicles and all those kind of things. You got to take taxis everywhere. And my wife says that she thinks that if God came today, if Jesus came today into the earth, he wouldn't go to fishermen, he'd go to taxi drivers or Uber drivers. I think she's probably right. So this is Rafi the Rascal. Rafi's life was a mess. His community had disowned him. He had lost his marriage, lost his business. He was in debt like crazy. He was under political pressure from his local community. Nobody trusted him in his community. It was his life. His nuclear family, like his sisters and his sisters' families, they would not spend time with him. So they were strange. He was in a bad place. But Rafi, through teams that came, short-term teams, he started hearing about Christians. One of the things that happened, which was kind of funny, he wasn't hardly even born again. I don't even know if he was born again. His heart was opening a little bit. This was very early on. We were on the border of Syria, and a young boy came to Rafi and in Arabic spoke to him and said, "Will you pray for my mom? I want her to come to the meeting tonight so she can get some of the food parcels we were handing out. And but she cannot walk. She's been in bed for 3 months. She cannot walk." And so Rafi calls over to one of the American team members who's visiting and says, "Joel, come over here and pray for this kid." And Joel's like, "Look, Rafi, you've heard me pray for lots of kids." Joel thought he was already born again. Rafi, he didn't know. So Rafi's like, "I don't know how to pray for somebody. I don't even know if I believe in this stuff." And then he's like, "Okay." And he prayed, God heal this little boy's mom. And so evening service came. The place was packed. And in walks this little boy holding a woman's hand. And it's his mom. She's walking in the middle of the meeting with about this many people packed into a building that's like this size, just the middle part, everybody packed in. And Rafi's in like the back third, and he stands up in the middle while the guy from the front's talking. He's like, Joel. If you know Rafi, you can understand this. He like doesn't care what people think. And he's like, look, the boy I prayed for, his mom's here in church. God answered my prayers. So even before we don't even think he was properly born again, he says he wasn't at that time. God's healing people through his life. That marked his life. It's one of the many stories of impact that led him to the place where he gave his heart to Jesus and became Rafi the righteous, no longer Rafi the rascal. You made that happen. However, his life still was, a dysfunctional mess from all the history and things and all the rascalness that he'd been doing. But he still said, and before we even started the church, he found out we're going to start a church there. He says, "I'm the first member of this church called Go Church." Well, so he became a part of the launch team. The launch team launched the church in April 2022. And by that, I mean you empowered the launch team to launch this church. First time a church in Beirut, Lebanon ever used a cinema in a major mall. We didn't do it other than the leading of the Lord. We didn't know that, really. We're like, this is the best venue. It has parking. It has AC. It has continuous power. And so let's launch the church there. We found out that just God's mercy and favor gave us the ability to have the church there when it shouldn't have happened. And so anyway, 300 and some people, 337 people showed up to that first service. That's without advertising, because you can't really advertise in the same way you can do here in the U.S. About 270 of them were from Muslim backgrounds. At least 85 gave their lives to the Lord. Again, I'm showing you what you made happen. Of course, when you start a church, a bunch of people getting born again, what's one of the first things you do? A water baptism. Guess who wanted to be water baptized first? Exactly. Rafi's like, I'm first. Nobody takes my place. Rafi is becoming more and more righteous all the time, and he met a righteous, precious lady named Patricia. So Rafi the rascal is becoming Rafi the righteous, who's now making a family, something he never thought would ever happen because he didn't think he deserved that, but God changed his life. Then within 1 year of pioneering that church, my wife and I, Julie Beemer, we turned over that church to a couple, expat couple, American couple, and 3 Lebanese couples, and Patricia and Rafi were one of those couples. In addition to that, you helped, after there was a blast, August 2020, there was a blast that was in the port of Beirut that displaced 300,000 people, including 80,000 children, in a moment's time. It was a big explosion that happened in the port of Beirut. It was the 4th largest non-atomic explosion in history, and you contributed towards the rebuilding. We fed like 25,000 people hot meals. We rebuilt, I think there was like 9 churches and businesses. One of those businesses, and then like 60 homes. One of those businesses was Patricia's. In fact, that's how Rafi and Patricia met. Rafi was the person spearheading a lot of that. And it was this shop, and the shop looked very different. It was blown in. They redid the shop. And then but after they got married, Rafi and Patricia took over that shop and turned it into a cafe, and that cafe is now an outreach. So I'm showing you how one life that you've transformed is had this ripple effect, and this is a picture of an outreach that they do, a relational outreach that they do. Now they're doing Arabic church. They're doing outreaches on a regular basis. Not only that, but then you sent your pastors and team to do a launch of a Bible college there in Lebanon. And so for the very first time, we had these like taster sessions, and this is a picture from that. Actually, just the reason it's so blurry is I grabbed it from a video clip. But this is the children that your church team impacted the lives of these children in this taster session, as we showed that the Bible college is not just about learning theology, but it's about a practical implementation of the principles of God to help raise up children and help raise up godly families. And your pastors did a great job. They did the training during that time. And of course, you have to eat a lot when you're in Lebanon. So here's some of the, but the reason I wanted to show you this, and I'll come back to it in a second, is the Bible college, because of your efforts, started successfully on October 7th. What else happened on October 7th? Does anybody know, 2023, October 7th, that's the day that Israel was attacked by Hamas. So usually I say, does anybody know what happened on October 7th? They're like, yeah, Hamas attacked Israel. No, you launched a Bible college in Beirut, Lebanon. That's what really happened. So now, if you don't know, these countries are adjoining, north and south. So, but 90-some students from 14 churches in a country the size of New Jersey, you helped to start that. But unfortunately, you guys don't know this probably, but the restaurant you ate in is no longer there. It was destroyed through explosions. So unfortunately, the restaurant's not there, but the impact that you made spiritually in the people's lives continues to go on and on and on. But hopefully that drives home just how serious and how close the impact of the war. That restaurant was in a place called Tyre. If you read your Bible, Tyre and Sidon, that restaurant was there in Tyre, where the main quarters or impact of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has been minimized there. So here's a map for those of you that are not quite familiar with the geographical region. Lebanon there on the top, the country below, Israel, the border there, the little square on that brings it out to this pop-up here, and you can see the blue and the orange represents all the explosions back and forth within the first couple of weeks. And so the Bible college, when it launched on that same weekend that Hamas attacked Israel, but then Hezbollah, with about 150,000 ballistic missiles and 150,000 soldiers, they entered into the fight as well. From Lebanon, started shooting missiles into Israel. But the Bible college continued. They thought, well, hey, wars broke out. The State Department issued a warning, and all the consulates and all the European consulates like Germany and Britain and everybody says, all their people need to leave. Even the Middle Eastern countries said, all your people need to leave. Everybody was leaving. They're like, I guess you're leaving too. The Bible college is not going to continue. But we prayed about it. We did our due diligence. We did our fact-finding, and we said the Lord wants us to stay, because even though we with American passports can leave, Rafi and Patricia and the others like them cannot leave. And we are not going to leave them. And that's really what has happened historically. Every time war broke out, the missionaries would fly to Cyprus or fly home and just leave the people there. And we did not do that, and that changed the whole mindset of the entire Christian community towards the Bible college and really embraced it like, well, you do believe this love stuff. You do believe this faith works by love stuff. And so we're good representations of you. I want to show you a change, a pivot moment. So the Bible college continued. I think there was only one time where we didn't meet because of all the troubles going on. And then September came, September 2024 came, and this is a pivot moment. This is Julie and I they always love to have pictures with the people that teach. And so a day later, or a couple days later from that picture, right after the session held, then the pager blasts happened. And some of you may not be familiar with what happened. Israel had had kind of intervened in the supply chain of the pagers. So they had convinced Hezbollah operatives not to use their cell phones because they tracked the cell phones and they would just blow them up at different places. We used to say jokingly, make sure that you know who your neighbor is because if you live next to somebody who's you just want to make sure your neighbors are not connected to Hezbollah. So the benefit we have is Israel's very, very good at targeting targets. They can go down, they can take out a driver in a car and leave people in the car that are still alive. And we've got all kinds of stories and examples of that. But anyway, so what they did is they convinced them, don't use your cell phones. So the commander of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, says, nobody use cell phones. What we're going to do is we're going to go old school and we're going to buy these pagers. So this is the funny part. This is so hilarious from a tactical perspective. Israel had already had compromised the supply chain and put little explosives in all these pagers, and they became the people that sold them to Hezbollah. And, typical Israelis, they're like, hey, look, these are the best pagers that you can get. They're super durable, and you're going to really want these. And by the way, they cost twice as much as everybody else, but you still want these. They paid $10 million for these 3,000 pagers. People are paying for the benefit of having little explosives on their hip. So at a certain moment, they all got this message supposedly from Nasrallah, the top of Hezbollah, pulled up, and, it says, press these two buttons to see the message. They pressed those two buttons, and those two buttons meant that they were looking at it closely and had their thumbs on these buttons. So a lot of them no longer have thumbs and are blinded. That sounds horrible, but this is the most tactical, wise approach because Israel was concerned that there's no way that they could bomb in the same way that they've done in Gaza. They couldn't bomb Lebanon in the same way. And they wanted to minimize the casualties, the civilian casualties. In this case, almost zero casualties, civilian casualties. The next day, so it was a brilliant tactical move. The next day, and I'm saying that for someone who lived there. So again, our joke was make sure that someone doesn't wear a pager who's your neighbor. You don't want to get in an elevator with a guy with a pager. So then they did the same thing with about 18,000 walkie-talkies. The Air Force started dropping bombs for the first time inside Lebanon, and eventually they took out, you just heard about the bunker busting bombs that happened last night in Iran. If you saw the news already, the U.S. dropped those bombs. Well, Israel dropped 79 bunker busting bombs to take out Nasrallah and his leaders who were about 7 stories below ground in a concrete bunker, and that changed everything. This is just to show you how close it is. This map shows a 2-mile, if you look at the key up there where it says 2 miles or 3 kilometers, that arrow is a 2-mile arrow. So the ministry headquarters is 2 miles, the Bible college is 2 miles from where that picture I just showed you, where that big hole is. And if you didn't notice, the big hole I have an arrow there pointing to full-size grown men to show you how big and how deep that hole is for scale. So all of that is happening, and yet the Bible college still continued, and the students graduated. And we also turned over the leadership of Lebanon to our leaders. That's what Club 1040 does. We go in, we start something from nothing. We then turn it over to local leaders who they can continue to go on because we are the going God. So we're going again. And that's important Did you realize, according to Romans chapter 15, verse 20, Paul had a biblical strategy. It's one that we've learned from and we mimic, we follow after. I like to follow people who have finished, who are those that complete. There's 3 people in the Bible that have finished. Who are those 3 people? Jesus on the cross. It is finished. John the Baptist, the Bible says, Jesus said of him, he finishes calling his purpose. But Paul also finished. I like to follow finishers. And Paul, as a finisher, he says, yeah, so I've strived to preach the gospel not where Christ was named, lest I should build on another man's foundation. And we're like, yeah, that's what we feel. And then he says, oh, what? I base this on a biblical text that he found in Isaiah. He based his life purpose and his strategy on this Bible text in Isaiah. And he says, so this, my text or my purpose, my plan has been based on this text. And he uses the word for a faith statement. Because we look at everything we see, and we don't see the finish line as incomplete. We see it as finished with the eyes of God. So we use faith to see the fulfillment of the Great Commission. We are living in a day where we can see the completion of the Great Commission, which will bring about the closure of this church age. We are the closest that it's been in recent centuries, really. So he says, my text has been, those who were never told of him, what would they say? They'll see him. Those who were never heard of him, they'll get the message. Those are faith statements. And so he says, so Paul, 3 things I see from that as I finish up, and Pastor John can get ready to come and finish the service off here. Paul made 3 observations. Number 1, or 3 observations I make about Paul's statement from that scripture in Romans. Paul knew the progress of the gospel of his day. Paul prioritized his life and ministry according to that, because in that passage in Romans, he says, the reason I've not come to you Christians at Rome up till now is because of the fact that I seek to preach the gospel where it's not been preached. But then he says, however, he's writing to the Christians at Rome. He says, however, now that the gospel has been fully preached from Jerusalem all the way through to Illyricum and all the region round about, and I have nowhere else to preach to the unreached in these parts, now it can come to you Christians. So he prioritizes life, his purpose, his ministry towards the unreached. So my question, and Paul was a finisher, so my question is kind of for this church and this generation of the church, maybe we also need to know the progress of the gospel. Maybe we also need to prioritize ourselves towards the gospel in order to complete the purpose of the church in our generation. So the progress of the gospel. This is a sign, this is a sort of a representation of the more than 17,000 people groups in the world and the progress of the gospel. And here's the good news about this. About 150 years ago, this map would have been mainly red and yellow with some green around the edges. But now, some of the largest churches in the world, there's a church I know of that has, there's more than one now, that has 100,000 seats, and they have multiple services on a Sunday. I've been in a meeting with 5 million people, one Christian meeting with 5 million people, where they measure the victory and the attendance by how many children were born during the meetings. You know, in a conference, a lot of times in the conferences, like, we had so many people from, we've had 23 states and so many countries represented in our conference. And here they're like, well, last night there were 4 boys, and combined throughout the conference week, there's been 14 boys and 9 children born. So the boys are winning. And the next night, there were 5 girls born. They're catching up with the boys. So during the meeting, that's happening. So that's the context. You can't see it right here, but if you go to Central and South America in the 70s, this map would have been mainly yellow, a lot of red and some green, very little green. But now it's almost all green, meaning the growing church. The red is the place where it's mainly unreached. China on this map's green China, not red China. In the early 70s, a group went from the United Kingdom to China to see if they could find any evangelical born-again Christians. They couldn't find one. I'm not saying there weren't any, but they couldn't find one. Now there's hundreds of millions of born-again Christians in China. We are living on the knife edge. We are living in the knife edge, and you can help speed things up. Here's what happens and how fast it goes. These are 3, we started the Bible College in Nigeria with 80 students. We turned it over with 1,200 students. It's now fully funded from Nigeria for Nigeria. They now have, after we turned it over, they now have 8,400 students in 9 campuses. You made that happen. And they're adopting unreached people groups, starting churches amongst unreached people groups, and then building buildings. The first church. You know, when you come across America, there's the first Baptist church, the first Methodist church, the first this, first that. There's places around the world where there's whole people groups where there's not a first church. But you have built first churches amongst formerly unreached people groups. You've made that happen. I celebrate you. I want to encourage you. Be the going God. Go further. Go faster together, like we always say. And the way to do that is first of all, you go to the world by coming locally with your time, your talents, your resources. God bless you. Thank you.